sing out your name and just say present, just so that we know we've got everybody and they're all on speaker. Councillor Woodward.
Present.
Councillor Ives Harris.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Berkery.
Present.
Councillor Blizzard.
Present.
Councillor Poposky.
Present.
Councillor Kay.
Present.
Councillor Etland.
Present.
Councillor Roldaker.
I knew I was the last, but most important, present.
Well done. That's only because it was on this list, sheet, to be quite frank. So I'll declare the meeting open. Welcome those present in attendance, which is not many, and advise that the meeting will be recorded in accordance with council policy entitled Audio Recording of Council Meetings, to record meetings of council, to assist in the preparation of minutes and ensure a true and accurate account of debate and discussion at meetings is available. Our first item tonight, we're not having prayers, obviously, because we're all around everywhere. So our first thing we've got to deal with is dealing with items by exception, because this is a new thing for us all. We need to do things slightly different. So I'll just ask our General Manager to quickly go through those, or probably ask questions, or if there's any questions that you're not sure of, you can ask our G.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For those who can see the meeting agenda on page 7, you'll see dealing with items by exemption. The recommendation is to action the recommendation as it's read there. There's a number of items that are listed. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to take those in relation to those dot points that are listed.
Are there any questions from anybody?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Just
If not, I'll ask Councillor Woodward to move that, if you wouldn't mind. You happy to move that?
Yes, I am happy to move that.
Thank you. And Councillor Ives Harris, are you happy to second that?
I am, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is any debate or discussion on the motion before us? If not, I'm going to go through councillors and you either say you're for or against it. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, forward,
Yep.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ives Harris?
For.
Deputy Mayor?
for.
Councillor Blizzard?
For.
Councillor Raposky?
For.
Councillor Kay?
For.
Councillor Redland?
For.
And Councillor Roldaker?
For.
That is carried. We'll go move right along. We'll now go to one. Everybody is here, so there's no apology. Confirmation minutes of the previous meeting held on the 26th of March. Now I'll ask Councillor Woodward again. Are you happy to move that?
Yes, sir.
Councillor Roldaker, are you happy to second that?
I suppose.
That's a yes, I'd say. Is there any discussion or queries on the accuracy of the minutes? If not, I'll going to put the recommendation. Again, I'll go around the meeting. I know it's going to take a while for this to all happen, but that's the only way of really knowing whether everybody's for or against it. So, Councillor Woodward, you're happy to with that?
Yes, for.
For it? Yep. Councillor Roldaker?
Yes, for.
Deputy Mayor?
For.
Councillor Kay?
4,
Councillor Blizzard,
4,
Councillor Bosky,
4.
Councillor Etland,
4,
and Councillor Riles. Harris.
4.
And I'm for it. I should have said that last time because I need to do it as well. So that is carried. Thank you. We now have items 3.1, 3.2 is nil, 3.3 is response for Councillor Poposky from last meeting. I'll now go on to 3.4, public, sorry, not public questions, without notice, and we have 4. What I intend to do is read those out, and then the General Manager will respond. I think everybody's got a copy of the questions and the responses. Is that true? Yes. Yep. But anyway, I'll read them out.
No.
Councillor-
I don't have it.
Oh, okay.
No,
They were
oh,
emailed.
no,
They were emailed
no, I
today.
haven't.
yep, yep.
Yeah, they were emailed today.
Yeah, they were emailed this
Oh,
afternoon.
okay.
At what time, Darryl?
Oh, they're around 4 o'clock.
Around 4 o'clock. It was later in the day.
No, well, I haven't got them yet.
That's okay. Well, I'll read the questions out.
on.
The first question from Councillor Poski asked the General Manager give Council a summary report on the steps taken in preparation and ongoing services and leadership to prepare and reduce the impact of COVID-19 virus that is threatening our community.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A number of extensive steps have been taken in relation to preventing and preparing for the spread and mitigation measures around COVID-19. The management of all council facilities, risk management of people in our workplace with vulnerabilities. We've identified our critical services that essentially are being delivered in community. We've also looked at sustaining and continuing meaningful work for our workforce. A number of things have adapted in that place. However, our team is still actively engaged in meaningful work. We've looked at regular business continuity plan meetings. We've adapted our levels of services to sustain public amenities in a number of our different communities. We've reviewed daily tasks. We've improved operational hygiene. We've adapted our meetings and training interfaces, similarly as we are dealing with an online meeting tonight. We've communicated to community and residents in a number of different forms to make sure the flow of information is being as consistent as possible. We've continued liaison with the local medical centre and the hospital. We've adapted council meetings and workshops to digital platforms. We've commenced early work on social recovery strategies. We've diverted phones, got people working from home, looked at communications in terms of how we get information out to those that may not be on digital platforms. We've activated an environmental health working group and a social recovery working group, provided emergency management centre team members to the regional centre to increase the local operational skills. We've developed reporting to council on local economic support package, which we will deal with later on this evening. And we've had a number of key team members in the local government sector and ministerial interagency communication. So Kelly will establish a response in the minutes, which we will deal with next meeting based upon those dot points.
Thank you. The second question from Councillor Etland, grants assistance. Councillor Etland inquired, what resources has Council enacted to help locals navigate the grants available at state and federal level across all sectors? And what steps are we taking to get money through the system faster than normal so people can access it, for example, support?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council has extensively promoted the support that's available through the state and federal governments, particularly their business assistance packages. Our council's communication officer has provided some very positive feedback directly to our local businesses on the support that they received once they've taken up the information. Business Tasmania has a very active website and a contact phone number which we're promoting, and it will be included in the written response to the question. Extensive information support's been circulated to a number of different local businesses. However, we have been made aware in the last 24 hours where one particular business is struggling in terms of dealing with a number of the paperwork components of that. We've provided some additional assistance to help in that space. The support packages are somewhat challenging if you do not have a good grasp on the operational knowledge of a business. However, council is limited in its innate knowledge of a particular business operation. So we can provide assistance, but we can't provide complete assistance in terms of assisting people to fill out their personal information in relation to the various application packages. Council is continually forwarding grant information to the local businesses and checking in with our service providers to ascertain whether they've actually seen an increase for support or not. Business Tasmania has a 1-800 phone contact number that I would encourage all people to actually avail themselves of. There's been some very positive feedback around that. Much of the funding has already been provided to support organisations in terms of the direct engagement. However, the choice of funding opportunities by individuals needs to reflect their exact circumstances. Council's been made aware that community transport has received additional funding in terms of providing an improved rollout of their services within the district, and that's been taken up by a number of local community members. It was very disappointing. Council's earlier question to the collective local business group was returned as having a response as not being able to provide any assistance to their particular business cohort. So we will need to do a little bit of additional work in that particular area. The funding of business improvement and innovation over the short and medium term essentially has the capacity in our report later this evening to have an impact on our local economy.
Thank you. Our third question is from Councillor Ives Harris. State and federal grants for infrastructure. Councillor Ives Harris inquired whether we as a council have a list of infrastructure we see is a priority for our region at this point in time, and if not, does council see that this is a priority for some discussion at a workshop next month?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is not a specific list of strategic assets or projects other than that is in our 10-year strategic asset management plan. It should be noted that the plan is focused upon council-owned and maintained infrastructure, particularly in relation to its long-term financial plan, expenditure projections and forecasts around council revenues. Neither the plan has regard to infrastructure that's owned by federal or state agencies and the relative benefits to community that particular infrastructure provides. The response in writing here suggests that a list of priorities for community with regard to council's infrastructure or strategic plan would be beneficial. In this regard, the two streams of infrastructure, community-based or those that are owned by state and federal governments. But in terms of council-maintained infrastructure, the inquiry that we received from the Deputy Prime Minister in relation to infrastructure contributions, Council has made a submission in respect of that for projected works that would assist us with our long-term asset management, and they include sealing of unsealed road junctions to the value of around 45,000, bridge replacement at Hewitt's Road on the Duck River to the value of 230,000, culvert replacements in various locations to the value of 28,000, Morbanna Road culvert extensions to the value of 20,000, Park Lane reconstruction to the value of 80,000, Mellow Road rehabilitation to the value of 412,000, Resheeting of unsealed roads to the value of 500,000. Those numbers quoted were essentially council's contributions, so the value of those works were actually double that. So, and in relation to infrastructure owned by others, the Bass Highway and federal and state governments, we would advocate for continued investment in those particular pieces of infrastructure.
Thank you very much. And that's the end of the questions in the open meeting. I'll now go on to 4, which is declaration of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests or conflict of interest. Obviously, I have one on 10.1 on the planning. Are there any other pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests?
I will be leaving the meeting at when 10.1 is being discussed, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Roldager. We'll now go on to...
Mr.
Yes.
Mayor, I will be leaving also too for 10.1.
Yep, that's right. So you got a non-pecuniary conflict of interest with that, is?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Thank you. All right. Item 5. Now we're going to put item 5 and 6 together. We were going to put a note of receipt of public questions in writing, but there was none, so that'll just be you'll find it'll be just 5 and 6. So the resolution will be 1 and 2, which is noting council workshops and noting the mayor's communications as listed. So would Councillor Rice-Harris should be happy to move that?
I would so move, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Roldager, you're happy to second that?
Yep.
Is there any questions on either the 2 items? We want to do the workshop first. Any?
Yes, I
items
have a
on-
question.
Yes. Councillor Redland?
Notification of council workshops, the 26th of March. It says that we discussed the Good Sports Council proposal, the working group and the Duck River Meadows. And I think that we've had a bit of a mix up there with another night, because the Duck River Meadows we didn't discuss on the 26th. That was the special workshop.
I thought that the one of the pavilions, that was to do with the Heritage Centre. Is that true?
There has been a discussion, but I'm happy to take that on notice just to clarify exactly the dates in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you. And if that's the case, then I think we need to separate if we're talking about the Heritage Centre, because it's a different item.
Yeah, well, the one on the 26th, it did say the Pavilions project briefing, which was the that is not the robotic dairy.
But it says
okay.
Duck River Meadows, and there are various names. So it would be great if you could clarify that. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Anything else on the workshops? If not, are there any questions on the Mayor's communications? If not, I'll going to put the motion. So Councillor Rice-Harris, you're a for or against?
4.
Councillor Roldager?
4.
Councillor Redland?
Yeah, as long as those amendments are made, then 4.
Yes, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, that's a given. Councillor Poski?
4.
Councillor Woodward?
4.
Deputy Mayor?
4.
Councillor Blizzard?
4.
And Councillor Kay?
4.
And on for it as well. So
Yep.
that is carried.
Yep.
There are no late agenda items. There are no public questions. There are no notices of motion. So we now go down to 10, which is the planning authority items. And I need to remind council that I advise the council would now act as a planning authority to consider the below mentioned report, the time being 6:20. And so I'll now vacate the chair and the deputy mayor will come and take over. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification, I'll disconnect councillors Oldacre and Ives Harris for this matter. As recorded, they're stepping out of the meeting. I will reconnect you when it's completed.
Thanks, Matthew.
Righto. We'll wait for the disconnection and we'll move on. Right to go.
Yeah, right to go.
Okay, I'll hand over to the Director of Engineering and he hasn't got his name tag in front of him. So Daniel, if you could take over and talk us through it.
Thanks through you, Deputy Mayor. The planning item at 10.1 is construction of a dairy cheese factory, 2 outbuildings, dairy and trade waste effluent system, installation of water tanks and grain silo and associated earthworks. Involves a number of discretions and received a number of representations during the advertising period. I'll pass to the consultant planner, Ashley Brooks, to talk in greater detail around the planning merits of the proposal for councillors' benefit.
Okay, so the representations raised a range of issues about potential conflict with nearby residential uses and schools, emissions, traffic impacts, drainage and effluent disposal. So the site's on the edge of the Smithton Township and the surrounding area includes a mix of different zones and uses. This includes general residential zone properties and 2 schools to the northeast. There's a number of discretions, as Daniel pointed out, that are relevant to determining whether to approve or refuse the application, and the issues raised in the representations need to be considered in the context of those discretions as well. So the discretions are the discretionary status afforded to the agricultural use in the open space zone, which applies to the council-owned property involved. The discretionary status of the cheese factory in the raw resource zone at 12 Nelson Street. The proposed agricultural use within that site involving cattle grazing, pasture management, dairying, irrigation of effluent is no permit required. The grain silo adjacent to the dairy and cheese factory building has materials with a light reflectance value greater than 40%, which is another discretion. And the gravel hard stand around the dairy and cheese factory building and the design of this area is another discretion. The application is in the agenda item is assessed as compliant with the performance criteria. So the relevant performance criteria relating to agricultural use in the open space zone is mostly concerned about retaining the informal passive recreation values associated with the land. And this will be achieved given the grazing paddocks will only occupy the eastern portion of the property. The cheese factory will be directly associated with the agricultural use on the rural resource zone land, so it therefore complies with the performance criteria relating to the use. The visual impact of the grain silo and the other similar structures, such as the water tanks, will not be unreasonable since these types of structures form part of the rural landscape and will be viewed in the context of the proposed buildings and scattering of remnant trees along the highway frontage. The gravel roadway, hard stand and other laneway areas are considered acceptable for the likely type, volume and frequency of traffic. And the only other thing to note is the recommendation in there around planting of a row of trees both on the council-owned land in Grant Street in the open space zone. So a secondary purpose of that zone is to provide a buffer or separating compatible development. So the row of trees is considered to provide consistency with that objective. As I said, with regard to the rural resource zone, the use is actually usually no permit required, as I said, but it's considered the planting will provide for a planning purpose, and therefore it's reasonable, being buffering again from the general residential zone to the northeast. That's probably a quick overview.
Thank you for that, Ashley. I'll just ask if there's any questions from any of the councillors in regard to that.
Yes, I have one, if no one else has one.
Go for it, Councillor Edlin.
Okay, I just wanted to say something before we get into it. Personally, I have some concerns about this item, and despite its merits, it doesn't sit comfortably. Last week, we had a workshop based on papers with 3 names as applicants: Agritas Trade College, Darryl and Bev Quillam, and Circular Head Council. I inquired into the legalities of the situation, which included speaking to previous mayors, an ex-commissioner of planning, as well as the director of local government division. They all agreed there were grounds for concern. At the workshop, it was then clarified that Circular Head Council and Darryl and Bev Quillam were in fact not applicants because there was a typo, and in fact Agritas was the only applicant. A councillor asked if a conflict of interest was declared upon asking for federal funds on behalf of the community, to which I've heard no answer to this point. 3 reputations have been put in, and I have been approached by the community around several aspects of the item. Being new to the role and not having a lot of experience, I am heavily bound to 2 factors of council internally, and I need to ask some questions before we proceed. Scott, as General Manager, can you vouch for the total independence and the capability of the third-party planner, Ashley Brooks?
Through the Deputy Mayor, yes, I can, in terms of Ashley's engagement through our due process to consider this application.
Thank you. Matthew, as Director of Governance, do you have any concerns about the governance of this planning item and the governance processes to this point?
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor. With respect to the question about this planning authority item, I'm comfortable with the process that's been undertaken with the planning authority.
Thank you. With these assurances, I'm happy to proceed.
Thank you, Councillor Edlin. Is there any other questions in regard to the proposal? Oh, if there's no questions, I might...
Hang on.
Yes, Councillor
Deputy
Kay.
Mayor? Yeah. What assurance do we have that effluent won't make its way to the Duck River? And what also will happen if the tanks, withholding tanks for the effluent, what if they see a need that they're going to have more tanks on the site? Because I think that we'll find there'll be a lot more water. We know how much dairy uses, and also waste from the property. I just think I'm really concerned that those holding tanks are not going to be enough. So what would council do if it's found that that effluent is not being withheld in those tanks?
Ashley, can you answer that, please?
Yes, I can. So the size of the tanks have been determined through the effluent management plan, which accompanies the application, which has been prepared by a qualified person to prepare such documentation. I mean, the risk about leakage.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that could be a risk with any wastewater
Yes,
system.
but this one's going to, is so close to the Duck River. And if you drive past there at the moment, you can see the water lying in the paddocks. So they're going to have extremely good storage, because they won't be able to put that onto the pasture at this time of the year. It's just too wet.
I mean,
Water's lying there now.
They're enclosed tanks. The application, the applicants looked at that issue as well in responding to the issue, because that was an issue raised in representations as well. They've said that tanks will be constructed to limit leakage, and Agritas will also monitor or undertake monitoring on at least a quarterly basis to identify any corrective action if needed.
Okay, thank you.
Just Councillor Atherton.
Further to that, while we're talking about effluent and the distribution of fertiliser, I can't see in any of the reports anything about the whey as a waste product. We've addressed, well, we've seen odour as an issue. I can't see anything about the byproduct of cheese.
Is there a comment on that part of it, Ashley?
Well, the system, the effluent system, is managing all the wastes associated with the dairy and the cheese factory as well.
So effluent in this report, the effluent refers to the whey as well.
That's right.
Okay, so if whey has bacteria that produces faster when it's sunny, is there something around that we could clarify with the odour? I mean, is there a way that you can, you know, are there specifics around that we need to fit in with?
I mean, it's sort of not regulated by the planning scheme. I mean, there's guidelines that apply to the irrigation of effluent, and I believe the EPA also has a role as well. Matthew might be able to clarify that, I'm not sure.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, there is a range of other requirements for operating a cheese factory and dairy, other legislation that sits outside of the requirements necessary, or the requirements of the planning permit itself. So there would be other mechanisms to regulate, deal with nuisances, monitor dairy licensing and the like. So the land use planning permit is not the sole governing factor in how the facility is operated. It is one, but there are other requirements that apply.
Yeah. No, that's true, but Betty's question was effluent, and we just established that effluent also includes trade waste from the cheese factory, which means that we need to understand the odour impacts of whey on a field on a sunny day, which will be which is a bit of a subjective. We'll distribute it when we think it's right, and when not. You know, just looking at the facts here, I think that is a point that needs clarification.
I think Councillor Atherton and Councillor Kay, I think from what they were saying, from what I can understand, is it's not a discretionary matter and it's done through the EPA and some other means. That was what I was thinking, taken from their comments. So.
Well, if we're having a resource processing, which is, we're talking about the use, and one of the major representations and the major research around this is about the effluent and what happens to it. So I think it's quite relevant.
Yeah.
Is there any other comments we can make on that?
Well, it's being irrigated as part of an agricultural use, which is the no permit required use within the rural resource zone. Yes, it's discretionary in the open space zone, which applies to the council owned title, but that's I guess, part of the reason for the row of trees that's proposed on that property, adjacent to Grand Street and the eastern boundary, as a buffer between the agricultural practices and that adjoining land.
So you're saying that those trees are essential to the effluent distribution for this project to continue?
The trees
They're not going to stop the smell.
the trees were put forward. the trees were put forward by the applicant in response to the representation.
Right. The problem I have with that, Norm, is you're saying that through this, the effluent is whey and the solids from the dairy, which is coming through. For the distribution method that you're using, you're actually saying that you need the size of the site in order for this to be a viable plan and to fit within the guidelines that you've said. Now that site is on a month-to-month lease. So where does that leave us in the fact that that lease could be cancelled next month? And then this as a planning item doesn't stack up for an ongoing sustainable plan?
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, you would understand that the land area that's available via the Grant Street property, which is on the month-to-month lease, is actually contingent on the capacity of the application. So in terms of the amount of effluent that is generated via either cow waste or whey would be contingent on that parcel of land using. So correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, the scale of the operations would contract if that land was not used as part of the development proposal.
Because what if council wanted to use it for something else?
Councillor Kay. Councillor Kay, let Ashley answer the question, please.
Sorry. Yep.
Yes, that's my understanding. But I suppose equally, I mean, there's other areas that could be used as well. Other farmland where it would also be these activities, these practices would be no permit required as well.
Through you, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Kay, did you want to, yeah, hold on, Councillor Woodward. Councillor Kay, do you have anything more to say? Question or something?
So what happens in the event that that land that council's leasing is wanted to be used by the community for something else in going ahead in the future? So Ashley's saying that there's other land that they could use, but some of that land is already going to be utilised by Agritas. Isn't that right?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Ashley, could you clarify your comments in relation to other agricultural land?
I just meant other rural resource zone land in the area rather than other land within that open space zone title, within the council title. I meant other if there's other opportunities to use farmland in the surrounding area which is in the rural resource zone. That's what I was referring to.
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask a question on the whey and the effluent. If there's a problem, if there ever is a problem with the tanks, can it be pumped out and spread on another property? Can it be pumped out to take away and put on another property, which I have seen done in some cases? Effluent trucks can come in and pump it out. That would relieve any problem if there ever is a problem. Is there access for them to pump that out?
Ashley, would you be able to answer that one at all?
From a planning perspective about applying irrigating it on different properties, if those properties are rural resource, if they're farming properties, it's part of the agricultural use of those properties. So yes, that can occur without without planning implications, planning requirements. But as Matthew pointed out earlier, there would be other implications as well, other regulations and requirements, environmental requirements that would be relevant.
Yeah, so that there is access for them to be pumped out. That was my question.
Yeah, I think that was actually mentioned somewhere that would be an option.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that would
Thank
solve
you.
odour, that would solve actually quite a few of the representations.
Yep. Yeah. So there is a way around it. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? If not, I might ask, would Councillor Kay like to move that motion?
I'll move the motion, Deputy Mayor, to grant the applicant, agree with the planning approval.
Okay, Councillor Blizzard, would you like to second that?
Yes, I'll Deputy Mayor.
Norman,
Yes, Councillor
what was just resolved about that pumping it out? Do we just leave it like that?
Ashley,
I would like to see that in there properly.
it is written.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Ashley, could you provide some advice in relation to that question based upon the effluent management report?
Well, I guess I suppose that would be it would be up to I think someone's mentioned that it's referenced in the report as a possibility. I mean, the effluent management plan will be an endorsed document as part of the permit. I'm not sure what's being asked about in terms of a condition to reflect the pumping out or the irrigation of the effluent elsewhere. Bearing in mind that it forms part of the no permit required use on the rural resource land within the property.
You can't condition something.
We can't really condition it, in other words.
Not if it relates to something which can occur without the need for a planning permit.
Not according to this planning document, we can't. No, that's fine. Does that answer your question, Councillor Etland?
No. What we're saying is the way around it would be that it could be pumped out, but they're saying their practices won't actually be that. So while, yes, it's a way around it, unless we can condition it, then we're still going to have the problem.
But we can't condition it because it's not in the planning scheme to be able to do that.
Is there any way?
So then we're not addressing the problem.
We can't address it in the planning application. From what I can understand from what I was just told, Dean.
That's right.
So therefore we can't put a condition on it, otherwise we're going above and beyond what, away from our actual planning.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, probably if I could interrupt the meeting for a moment and just make the observation that there are other mechanisms, environmental protection notices and the like, that can be issued on properties requiring certain things to be done to manage if there are nuisances, environmental nuisances occurring. In the first instance of a land use planning permit, that generally sets the broad conditions of how something like this operates, and as people start operating and working, then there'll be adjustments that need to be made. So generally planning permits have a bit more of a broader focus, but things like an environmental protection notice could be issued with very specific requirements in response to any issues identified.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I think what Matthew's saying would be a way forward in case the odours were unbearable by those dwellings that are close by, because there's no farms with that many dwellings around them, probably in circular head. So if the odour becomes really bad, then maybe what Matthew's suggesting would be a way to do it, for council to keep an eye on it.
Yes. I guess that's so you're saying we can't do anything through the planning side of it anyway, is that right, Matthew?
No.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I guess I'm making the observation that quite often these things are not known until you get to operating of what actually is required to address an issue. And there are other mechanisms to address nuisances such as environmental protection notices.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be, if this is a foreseeable issue, which is not addressed the way, I don't believe that odour in the way has been given significant attention in these documents, and we've got as two answers to the representations that the size of the site and the presence of the existing drainage channels ensure that the capable managing stormwater associated with the earthworks and internal road infrastructure in accordance with the acceptable solution of 26.4.1 of the scheme. You're saying that for two of those, that we actually have it covered off, whereas I don't think you're addressing the issue.
I think from the planning point of view, we can't. From what I can hear from Ashley and Matthew.
That's right.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the reason that I brought up about the effluent and the way, I thought it would be quite simple to have it pumped out just like a normal septic tank and get rid of it to take that pressure off if there is at any time. That's the only reason I brought that up. To
You've muted yourself, Councillor Woodward.
Questions. Sorry. Oh, okay.
Oh, you're right. No, good. No, you're right now.
Yeah.
The
reason I brought that up. Are you with me?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, that's the reason that I brought that up, because it would take the pressure off the effluent if there is a problem and the way.
I guess if there is a problem, that's what they'll have to do.
Yeah, that's the only reason I brought that up.
Yeah. No.
And through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, the management of that is actually not through the planning conditions, it's actually through environmental licenses.
Yep, that's right.
I understand that. Yep. Thank you.
So we've got a motion and we've got a mover and a seconder. Would the mover like to speak to that, Councillor Kay?
No, I think, no, I'm happy with everything, I think, now. But we need to make sure that we do keep a check on the odour and with the effluent and way, like other previous councillors have mentioned. And, yeah, just hope that some of the representations are happy with how it eventually develops to the property.
Thanks, Councillor Kay. Councillor Blizzard, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Look, I've been listening to a series of questions here, and we give this a fair building last week, and I too was surprised at the change come meeting time on the thing with, and it wasn't portrayed to us before that. But that's beside the point. Look, I revisited this again and had a good look at it again today. I've listened to all the questions. I believe the planning side of things have been covered off to my limited knowledge in that, and I'm quite comfortable to support.
Thank you, Councillor Blizzard. Is there any other comments want to be made or speak for or against it?
I'd like to speak.
You've muted yourself again, Councillor.
Yeah, I know. I've got a habit of doing that.
Right, go for it.
I certainly support the project and all the recommendations that are before us. And as we've heard, there have been 4 representations. I believe that they have been answered well by our planning. I'd just like to say some positive comments. It's a great educational opportunity for students in agriculture, dairying, not only local but right along the coast, to see robotic dairy in action, and cheese making, also calf rearing, also a wonderful tourism attraction. And I'd just like to make a comment on the way the planning has been done, and a lot of work has gone into it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Woodward. Is there any other speakers for or against? If not, I'll ask the mover. Can you just let me know for or against, please? Councillor Kay?
Four.
Councillor,
And I thank them for the work they've done too. It's a really in-depth report there, so I'm for it. Yeah.
thanks, Councillor Kay. Councillor Blizzard?
For.
Councillor Poposky?
For.
Councillor Atlin?
For.
Councillor Woodward?
For.
I think it's a good project too, and I'll also be supporting it under the planning scheme. Everything seems to be ticked all the boxes. I'm for it as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll now hand back over to the Mayor.
Thank you.
I'll leave now, so thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ashley.
Ashley.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ashley.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks,
you.
Ashley.
Thank you.
Good job.
How do we let Stephen know that?
Just through the meeting, we have Councillor Oz Harris back online. I just need to check on Councillor Oldacre one moment.
He just
Thank
walked
you.
into the office, into where he was, so we'll just wait till confirm that he's there.
I'm back, Mr. Mayor.
You back? Thanks, Councillor Oldacre, you're right. There with us yet, Councillor Oldacre? Probably still getting hooked up again. You there, Councillor Oldacre? Councillor Blizzard just checked up. Oh, you're there, right, thank you. You're there, I can hear you. We'll go on to 11.1, which is the Good Sports Council Tasmania Pilot 2020. And Deb, I think you're taking us through this.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, before you is the Good Sports Council Tasmanian Pilot 2020 report. The Good Sports Council proposal is part of the Alcohol and Drug Foundation Good Sports program. The existing Good Sports program was set up to help educate and provide support to sporting clubs to assist with reducing harm, improving behaviours associated with risky consumption of alcohol and drug taking. This program was introduced into our community with our local sporting clubs over 10 years ago, and to date we have 18 registered clubs in the program. This additional proposal is recognising the important role of council when it comes to positive role modelling and behaviour. The proposal is designed to leverage existing resources and commit to undertaking additional activities which are all sporting clubs in the council region are provided with information about accrediting to the Good Sports program and implement and approve alcohol management policy and illegal drug policy. All council leases, licences and rental agreements provided to sporting clubs must include clauses banning clubs from conducting drinking games or activities that lead to rapid consumption of alcohol, conducting functions with more than 4 alcoholic beverages included in the ticket price, and conducting happy hours which promote rapid alcohol consumption. Council must implement procedures to ensure that clubs comply with council expectations. For example, before a lease is approved, council check to see if the sporting club is accredited with the Good Sports program. Council will conduct at least one sports forum per year, inviting external specialist speakers, providing information, training and support to running a sporting club that supports the reduction of alcohol and drug harms in the community. And Council will publicly promote the award of their support for the Good Sports program. There's other optional activities that may be included at the discretion of Council. The Good Sports staff will undertake an annual review of the Council practices to ensure that we're maintaining the criteria. This proposal aligns with many of our recommendations from our corporate strategic plan, our community health and wellbeing plan and our youth plan. There should be no additional financial burden to Council, as the Good Sports program is funded to provide project officers that support the local clubs with registering and stepping through the processes of implementing policies and providing resources. The Redpath Football Club are showing the way by working hard to change the culture within their club, and they were rewarded for their efforts by recently being awarded the National Good Sports Club of the Year. Councillors, we recognise that sporting clubs are an important social hub in our community, and we need to ensure that they have the tools to provide a safe environment and impart knowledge and promote positive health and wellbeing behaviours. As Council, we can ensure we're providing leadership by building on the existing program and implement the recommendations as part of this proposal. Councillors, the Good Sports Council Tasmanian Pilot 2020 report is presented for your consideration to endorse. Thanks.
Thanks, Deb. Are there any questions to Deb at all? If there's no questions at all, I know that we did talk about it a little while ago. I'll ask Councillor Ives Harris to move this, if he's happy to move it.
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Oldacre, are you happy to second that?
I'll second it.
Thank you. No discussion required at all? There's no discussion. Councillor Ives Harris, for or against?
For.
Councillor Oldacre?
For.
Deputy Mayor?
For.
Councillor Woodward? Councillor Woodward? You're talking, but I can't hear you.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward.
Sorry.
Councillor Rapowski?
For.
Councillor Kay? Councillor Kay?
She's muted.
She's muted, I think. Councillor Blizzard?
Yeah, very much for.
Councillor Retland?
For.
For.
Count, Mr Mayor.
And thank you, everybody, and I'm for it, so that's unanimous. Thank you. We'll now go on to 11.2. Waste management strategy actions, waste transfer station. Daniel, I think you're doing this one.
Thanks, through you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of the report in front of you tonight is to consider bringing forward some of the waste strategy actions from the recently adopted waste strategy. Recently, Council undertook a survey of circulated residents, asking a number of questions that would help guide some of those actions proposed in the strategy. One of the key question related to the item tonight is the action from the strategy to review the fee structure and tip ticket arrangements to ensure it encourages sustainable disposal, and that post that implement changes to fee structure for the following year. We don't yet have the full detailed survey results. We were able to, for the purposes of the agenda, get the results from the question specifically related to that matter, and the question asked was, White Hills Waste Transfer Station is paid for by gate entry fees and the levy charged to all property owners. Council is considering removing entry fees for Circular Head residents, excluding businesses. If this occurred, tip tickets would no longer be required for residents to use the transfer station. The transfer station would be paid for by the levy charged to all properties, with business users and visitors being required to pay entry fees. Do you support free entry to the waste transfer station for Circular Head residents, not business users? The results presented from that question showed a vast majority, slightly exceeding 70%, agreeing with that notion of moving to no ticket free entry for Circular Head residents. So that forms the basis of the recommendation. Just as a recap of some of the background information from the strategy, 25% of Circular Head households at the time of setting the strategy had a gross income of less than $650 per week, and 28% were renting. With the current COVID-19 circumstance, economic slowdown, potential loss of employment, it's recommended that council consider bringing forward that measure of not charging entry fee for Circular Head residents at the gate as of 1st of March to provide some hardship relief for Circular Head residents. It should be noted that in the recommendation it suggested a partial move, not all fees at this point, so car boot, station wagon, and that's intended to not inadvertently set a behaviour that's not expected by the Premier to not encourage non-essential trips from households at this point in time. So the recommendation is in three parts as per the screen in front of us there, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for a start? If no questions, I'll ask Councillor Oldacre, would you be happy to move that? Councillor Oldacre, are you happy to move?
Mr. Mayor, I had a question before we go moving. Point 2, I just took it that Daniel said the 1st of March. This has got the 1st of May.
1st of May. Yeah, 1st of May is right.
Yep.
1st of March is it?
My apologies, I might have misstated that.
Yep.
North Melbourne people can't help themselves.
Got nothing else better to do.
So you're happy to move then with that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Blizzard, you're happy to second?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any discussion, councillors?
Yes,
If
Mr.
not-
Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Poposky.
Mr. Mayor, at the workshop I discussed a point and I'd like to move 2 amendments, please.
Yep, let us know what they are.
Right, the first amendment is council approve 1 free small bag of waste for RV travellers to the transfer station. And second amendment is undertake a review of the number of bins in the urban area.
So you would add that as 4 and 5?
Yes, thank
so
you.
You're agreeing with 1, 2, 3, but you want to add 1 small bin for RV?
Yep.
And a survey on
A review.
A review, sorry. Yep.
A review of the number of bins, because I think if 4's okay, we won't require the bins and therefore we're saving money.
Is somebody prepared to second that amendment?
I'm not sure where I stand here, Mr. Mayor. I'd be happy with that amendment, but as a seconder of the motion, where do I stand on that?
You can still second that.
All right, I'll second the amendment then.
Thank you. So we're just dealing with the amendment at this point in time, which is twofold. One is for the RV small bag, and the other one is for a review. Is any other speakers for or against? Do you want to say any more about it, Councillor Bosky? Speak to it first.
Yes, thank you. as discussed at the workshop, I can see this as a positive move in that it's what's happening at the moment. A lot of rubbish is being dumped around in our designated bins and around in the general vicinity of the municipality. By offering a small amount of rubbish on the RVs as they go past, especially as they come through the district, it should eliminate the need for them to drop the waste at places that we do not want. And also, as in speaking on the second part of the second amendment, is I can see that there will be savings for the Circular Council in that if we reduce the number of urban bins, because of the rubbish won't be as great, that's a saving for the council.
Thank you. Any speakers against?
Mr Mayor, I just have a couple of queries to particularly the last part of this amendment, is that I take it we're going to make things free for people out to the transfer station, but why will the bins be reduced? Because a lot of their household garbage, they're not going to take that out there.
You want to answer that, Councillor Poplawski?
The point, to clarify the question, my theory is if we can get the RV people to put the rubbish in at the transfer station, they won't be dumping it into the bins that require around the urban area, not the household rubbish, nothing to do with the household rubbish, it's to do with the visitor rubbish.
And if I may,
Okay.
Mr Mayor, Mr Mayor, the way I see that as well is that it is only review after a period of time to see what effect, and if there's been no effect, there should be no need to make any changes.
That's right. Yep. Any further speakers for or against?
I was actually going to comment, Mr Mayor, if I could.
Yeah.
But it looks like they've fixed the thing on there with public bins. So it'd be the council-owned public bins in the municipality, is that right?
That is correct.
Yep.
Yep.
No worries, thank you.
Any further speakers for or against?
Well, I think it's a good amendment, Ash.
Thank you. Any
Yes, I
further
agree. Yeah.
speakers against?
No.
Doesn't appear to be anybody against it. So what I'm going to do is go around and we're only talking about the amendment at this point in time. So we're really talking about the 4 and 5, not the 1, 2 and 3. And then if this is approved, then we go to the 1 to 5. So Councillor Poplawski, you're for or against?
I'm for it.
Yeah, I would have thought so. I'd be worried if you didn't.
I've done a lot of work.
Yeah, for.
Councillor Oldacre?
Yeah, I'll support it.
Councillor Kay?
For.
Councillor Redland?
For.
Councillor Ives Harris?
For.
Deputy Mayor?
For.
Councillor Woodward?
He's muted again.
He must be muted. I'm for it while I'm waiting for him. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I'm for it.
You're for it.
I'm for it. How many
Okay.
more times?
Well, a few yet, yeah, just bear with me. That is carried, and now so the motion is now the 1 to 5. Is anybody who wants to speak for or against the motion? I wouldn't expect so, but if not, I'll go around the room again. Councillor Oldacre.
Yep. Aye. For.
Councillor Blizzard.
For.
Councillor Kay.
For.
Councillor Redland.
For.
Councillor Ives Harris.
For.
Deputy Mayor.
For.
Councillor Woodward.
For.
You're on the ball. Councillor Poplawski.
For.
And I'm for it, and so that is carried unanimous. Thank you. Well, that wasn't that painful. That was good. 11.3, financial reports. We've got Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay, everyone?
I can hear.
Yes.
Yes.
We can, Raj.
Right. 11.7, we have the financial reports for period ending 1st of March. We have one. Has somebody got rust on paper or something? It just sounds really. No, that's right.
You're like a policeman.
Yeah, that's it. We received one application for first homeowners grants with 15 in total for the year, which is very pleasing up until the end of March. So hopefully a few more before the 30th of June. On page 147, we have the closing funds for the special committees with those 5 now listed there. The Heritage Centre obviously is now an incorporated body, so it doesn't come under here, and Trewater Rec has transferred back to the Crown. We have the profit and loss statement, which shows a current deficit of $30,000 up until the end of March. And so we'll continue to monitor that in the next couple of months as we obviously move through this interesting period of time that we're in now. Yeah, looking towards that projected loss of $1 million, hopefully. We have the statement of financial position, which is your balance sheet, with net community assets of around 213 million. And currently we've got 6.1 million at an at-call rate of not a lot. We have the cash flow statement, which shows our cash at the end of period of around just a smidge over 12 million. We have the receivables with our current rates outstanding of 4.67% compared to 4.35% last year. And I know payments are still coming in dribs and drabs, which is good. We've got the sundry debtors, which have a balance of 311 compared to 378 last year. But as I say, each month it just depends what we raise, and a lot of grant funding actually affects that. And we have the bank rec, which shows the $12 million balance, and the cash graph. And the projects, as we've talked about before, are actually in the information bulletin, which follows on the open senior management report. So in terms of audit, I'm not sure where we sit with restrictions at the moment. We've got a date at the end of May booked in for that, and we'll just have to play it by ear in the next few weeks to see whether anybody ends up on site or we end up having to send a lot of information through for the auditors to do it from Launceston. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. So I will present the report for Council's consideration.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Is there any questions on the report? If not, I'll ask Councillor Poski to move that, if he would.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
So moved.
Councillor Poski. Deputy Mayor, are you happy to second?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any debate? If there's no debate, I'll go around the room again for a decision. Councillor Poski, for or against?
For.
Deputy Mayor?
For.
Councillor Ives Harris?
For.
Councillor Etland?
For.
Councillor Woodward?
For.
Councillor Kay? Councillor Blizzard, you're for it, thank you.
Yes,
Councillor
thank
Blizzard?
you.
For.
And Councillor Oldacre? Councillor Oldacre, are you unmuted? It's carried. It's just a matter of whether it's unanimous or I'm certainly for it. Councillor Oldacre, are you with us still?
You there?
Yes. You're for it?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. That's carried. 11.4, Senior Management Report. Up to page 155 for anybody that mightn't be keeping up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Senior Management Report is presented there. You'll note some notes in relation to Legat Annual Conference. Essentially has been suspended for this year, being the 108th Annual Conference that was scheduled for July. Smithton Medical Centre flu immunisation clinics are progressing well, and dare I say it's something that Council will most likely consider being involved in over the longer term, given the high rates of immunisation and success that that's been having. You'll notice there's some notes there in relation to the social recovery team, and other documents have been circulated over recent days in relation to social recovery. Harmony Day in the Park, essentially that project is being reviewed given the social restrictions we have in place at the moment. There's a number of notes there in relation to Circular Head youth leaders and other youth activities. In relation to some innovations there's Youth and Community Officer is actually working fairly extensively at the moment, maintaining those social connections with the youth in our community. Youth Week, there's been a successful grant applying for that activity, but the funding is being held on to until further notice, until we know exactly what particular programs would be possible in that space. IM project, staff are currently looking at that being whether that could actually be delivered online. A number of inquiries are operating in that space. Setting up youth centre, youth training, proceeding under changed environments. The Charts Festival program is actually up and running. There's a number of innovative interactions there that are occurring in that video space, supporting people actually engaging with that valuable community event that's scheduled for around September this year. Depending on circumstances, that will adapt in the coming months. Under the recreational heading, you can see the notes there in relation to the images of the additional work that's been completed down at Smithton Indoor Wellbeing and Recreational Leisure Centre. Those particular capital investments and projects are drawing to a rapid close. In relation to emergency management, councillors will be aware that we have been circulating extensive amounts of information in relation to COVID-19 in recent days. In relation to risk, there is nil to report. In relation to tourism, the numbers and revenue for March have suffered a decline, as you would expect in relation to the social isolation activities that are being undertaken across the state. There is a number of attached documents there in relation to the information bulletin for April. I would present the report and seek any questions from elected members of the Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? See a number of letters there from the information bulletin as well. The one on from Minister Ferguson, it's a matter of, I know Councillor Ives Harris asked a question about infrastructure, whether we ought to be looking at putting that in as far as infrastructure that we could discuss in the next month. And so, yeah, that'll be for another night. Obviously, it's not on our agenda for tonight, but that's something that I was thinking about when I saw the question from Councillor Ives Harris. No discussion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think, yeah, that's exactly what I was referring the question to, and I think that'd be a great approach for us as council if we were to get half an hour during a workshop just to discuss a few points like that. Because if we could say to state or federal where the next $5 or $10 million where we see it best spent in our community, it could be proactive for something like a project like this, where it not only benefits Circle Head, but the whole West Coast, which in turn helps tourism, and in turn everything within our region.
Yes, plus it's not going to be on our sheets either, so we don't have to depreciate, which is handy for us.
Yes.
Any further questions?
No, Mr Mayor.
If not, I will ask Councillor Retland, would she move the recommendation?
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Retland. Councillor Kay, are you happy to second that?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion or comments or debate? Nothing. Councillor Retland, I'll go for you first. For or against?
For.
Councillor Kay? Councillor Kay, you're happy to?
Yes,
for?
Mr Mayor.
Thank
Hang
you.
on.
Yeah, I'm with you. Deputy Mayor?
Oh, yep.
For.
Councillor Blizzard?
For.
Councillor Ives Harris?
For.
Councillor Voposki?
For.
Councillor Woodward?
For.
Councillor Oldacre?
For.
And I'm for it, so that is carried. Thank you. We now head to 11.5, minutes of the Circular Head Heritage Centre of the 16th of March. And I'll ask Councillor Etland again whether you'd be happy to move that.
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, happy to second?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Should we go to 11.6 at the same time?
Yes, we could do. Are you happy to do 11.6 as well, which is the Northern Area Management Committee, Councillor Etland? Are you happy with you to do that?
Yes, happy to do that.
Thank you. Good. And you're happy to second both of them, then, Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Is there any question, first of all, at the Heritage Centre at all, or?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Where are we at with the Heritage Centre? Like, I heard a comment made last week that it was over budget for a new setup up at Agritas, but where are we at with that project?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Currently waiting on some advice from the planning consultant who's looking at that project, Peter Poke. He is hoping to have some advice back to us within the next few weeks. Once we receive that information, there'll be a further briefing prepared on that project.
There was some part of it we decided we could leave out at this point in time, and which would bring the price down, so it had to come in under the 2.8, obviously, otherwise we couldn't afford it. So that's what the briefing is all about. So, but councillors will be briefed on that before any further happens. Any other questions on the Heritage Centre?
Yes, Mr Mayor. If could we note for discussion that stage 2 or the unfunded section may be an item we could put on our infrastructure list?
Yes, no, dead right.
Yeah.
Any further questions on Heritage Centre?
No, Mr Mayor.
If not, we'll go on to the Northern Area Management Committee. Are there any questions on that, or anything you need to be aware of? Councillor Voposki?
Mr Mayor, due to the COVID-19, I didn't attend this meeting. As you can see, it was an apology. So I'd ask the question of Scott. Could you elaborate where the information? It says in the minutes that Ian also advised he had met with Scott Riley with discussions about the sale of the car park. if you could mention that and the maintenance of the Freedom Camping area, is there anything there we need to know?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the discussions that were held with the chairperson of the committee indicated that if council was to move in relation to disposing of any land that's essentially, which is typically used for the show car park area, that they be engaged in a further discussion. They have a number of asset projects they would like to engage if funds do become available. There was also a discussion in relation to the management of RV camping areas, and I've confirmed that I'm prepared to engage in further conversations there. However, given the current tourism situation with the area being excluded for public access, that is yet to be reviewed based upon further consultation with the industry when it reopens.
Thank you. Can I just make a note on your first comment? We're going against council convention to suggest that they can pick the money from any sales when we have sold assets throughout the municipality and it goes into general revenue, and I just want that noted that that's where that money goes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly the comments that I did make to the chairperson, to say council would be looking at where it spends those assets, not necessarily committing it to that particular site.
Thank you. You're on the ball, sir.
Okay, anything else on Northern Area Management Committee? If not, I'll be putting the motion, which will be those two reports. Councillor Edlin, for or against?
For.
Deputy Mayor?
For.
Councillor Blizzard?
For.
Councillor Woodward?
For.
Councillor Ives Harris?
For.
Councillor Oldacre?
For.
Councillor Kay?
For.
Councillor Poposky?
For.
And I'm for it, so that's carried unanimously. We are now down to page 260, which is the council resolved by absolute majority that matters listed below be considered in closed meetings. Can we add the next one to it as well?
We prefer that we do on the separate resolution.
We'll do these as separate resolutions. So we'll go through the process. Councillor Edlin, are you happy to move that?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Blizzard, happy to second?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't expect there's any discussion, but if there is, sing out. Otherwise, we'll go to resolution. So Councillor Edlin, for or against?
For. For.
Thank you. Councillor Blizzard.
For.
Councillor Ives Harris.
For.
Councillor Poposky.
For.
Councillor Oldacre.
For.
Deputy Mayor.
For.
Councillor Woodward.
For.
Councillor Kay.
For.
And I'm for it. I need another one. I've got to go through the process again, folks. The council meeting resolved by absolute majority to close the meeting to the public. And Councillor Woodward, are you happy to move that?
I certainly am.
Deputy Mayor, second.
So move, Mr. Mayor.
I don't think there'll be any discussion on this. So Councillor Woodward, for or against?
For.
Deputy Mayor.
For.
Councillor Blizzard.
For.
Councillor Ives Harris.
For.
Councillor Kay.
For.
Councillor Edlin.
For.
Councillor Poposky.
For.
Councillor Oldacre.
Yeah, for. I did note that the former councillor Spinks has been listening to us up to date, so make sure you cut him off.
And I'm for it. So that's all. So thank you, anybody that is on Skype and is listening to it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it. I know it's been an interesting meeting, but we've got through it, and so we've finished the public one now. So thank you.
Thank you.